We're coming on the air with some breaking news from the Supreme Court about former President Donald Trump. The High Court just said moments ago that Mr. Trump can stay on this year's presidential ballot in Colorado after that state barred him from its Republican primary. Colorado Supreme Court had disqualified Mr. Trump under a constitutional provision that bars people who engage in insurrection from holding office. The decision today, of course, coming ahead of tomorrow's Super Tuesday contest when 15 states, including Colorado, will hold primary elections. Senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett is here with us to walk us through what this decision means and what this decision does not mean. Vaughn Hilliard is also here in the studio as well. He's been covering the Trump campaign. Vaughn, I'll get to you in just a moment. Laura, let me start with you. This was a case that was about Colorado, but it sounds like this is going to have ramifications that extend beyond just that state.
Absolutely, Craig. The Republican frontrunner is now permitted to run for president, not only in Colorado, but across all 50 states. The justices here in a unanimous decision rejecting Colorado's effort to ban him under the Constitution's so-called insurrection clause, the heart of this case about the meaning of a largely untested provision of the Constitution, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which says essentially that if you take an oath to uphold the Constitution and then you engage in insurrection, you are not permitted to hold that office once again. But again, the court here is saying because the Constitution makes Congress rather than the states responsible for enforcing Section 3 against federal office holders and candidates, we reverse. So again, a clear win for the Republican frontrunner. The Colorado case was the one that was in front of them right now, but other states had tried to ban him from the ballot, including Maine and Illinois. With the court doing this right now, those essentially will also be wiped away, Craig.
And again, as you point out, a unanimous decision, not something we see very frequently from the Supreme Court these days. There were two questions at hand. You mentioned, of course, the clause in the 14th Amendment, but there was also the question of who actually gets to decide who's engaged in an insurrection in this country.
Yes, and Donald Trump's attorneys had essentially tried to convince the court successfully here that this was for Congress to decide. Not just any one state could sort of unilaterally take somebody off a ballot in a national election. That was something that the justices were very interested in at oral argument, something that they appeared deeply skeptical of, the Colorado voters in this case trying to do that. And obviously, Trump's position prevailed in this case.
So this does now mean that the outstanding ballot challenges have been done away with.
Yes. Remember, there were dozens and dozens of lawsuits across the country. Some courts had tried to dodge the issue. Some courts had ruled in Trump's favor, saying states didn't have the power to do this. Colorado was the first one that had taken that unprecedented step in trying to ban him. And then two others followed, as I mentioned, in both Illinois and Maine. And now those will no longer hold.
Well, we've talked about this a fair amount over the past few weeks. You're not terribly surprised. It seemed as if the justices were openly skeptical, shall we say, when those oral arguments were made roughly a month ago.
They were. And you'll remember how this all started was by voters. This was sort of a project that was started at its inception with a liberal think tank group that was trying to see if they could disqualify the former president. They started sort of a state-by-state effort trying to figure out which states would be most receptive to it. But it wasn't just progressives who were thinking that they might actually be able to do this successfully, Craig. There were a number of outspoken Republicans and other conservatives who had tried to make this argument and say, if you look at just the plain text of the 14th Amendment, he should be banned. But again, we're going to work our way through the decision and see exactly how the court dispensed with that.
I'll let you sift through that for just a few moments. I'll turn my attention to you, Mr. Hilliard. You've been spending a fair amount of time over the past few months. Actually, past few years, covering the former president. What do we expect to hear from him when he does make some remarks with regards to what we're hearing from the Supreme Court today?
Right. Donald Trump is at his Mar-a-Lago estate in West Palm Beach right now. We saw in the minutes after the oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court a month ago, him go and address cameras responding to it, calling it a beautiful process that he watched play out at the Supreme Court. The biggest reality here this morning is that Americans should expect Donald Trump to be on the general election ballot for the White House this November. He is well on his way to beating Nikki Haley for the GOP nomination. He could wrap it up as soon as March 12th or even March 19th. And other attempts to keep him off the ballot failed. Laura mentioned Congress, in the Supreme Court suggesting it's up to Congress to determine whether he had engaged in insurrection. And folks will recall, in the weeks after the January 6 attack, when Donald Trump had left the White House, that the U.S. House voted to, in fact, impeach Donald Trump on insurrection charges. But then the U.S. Senate came a few votes short of voting to convict him. 7 Republicans voted to convict him during those proceedings, but it took 2/3 of the Senate to actually bar him from ever being able to serve in the White House again. And another argument from Trump's attorneys in front of the U.S. Supreme Court was the fact that the special counsel, Jack Smith, who was the one who charged Donald Trump with those felonies stemming from the efforts to overturn the 2020 election, Jack Smith, the special counsel, never actually charged him on felony insurrection charges, which again hits at the heart of, for all intents and purposes, Donald Trump. As long as he wraps up this GOP nomination, the efforts to keep him from the ballot in November are all but over now.
All right, Vaughn, stand by for me for just a moment. I want to come back to you. But right now, let me bring in Carol Lamb. Carol is a former federal prosecutor. She's also an NBC News legal analyst. And Carol, as my friend and colleague Laura Jarrett pointed out just a few moments ago, a unanimous decision here, somewhat uncommon. But what have we been able to glean, if anything, so far from sifting through this order? Anything from the liberal justices, the more liberal justices specifically?
Yes, the 3 liberal justices did write a concurrence where they essentially said, we agree with the general ruling here that Colorado cannot by itself depart from the rest of the nation in taking Donald Trump off the ballot. But they said that the court went further than it had to. And this is a principle of judicial restraint that they're advocating. They said, you said enough. You said that Trump can't be on the ballot, that Colorado can't decide for itself not to put Trump on the ballot. But you went further and said that it's Congress who really dictates who can be removed from consideration because he is a so-called insurrectionist. They said you didn't have to go there. That was farther than judicial restraint permits you to go, and they're critical of the majority opinion for that reason. I will also note that Justice Barrett, typically considered a conservative justice, really emphasized in a separate concurrence that this was a unanimous opinion of the court, and she said that is the message that the nation should take away from this, that we can decide these cases unanimously.
Carol, stand by for me as well, if you can, please, ma'am. NBC News legal analyst Catherine Christian is also with us now. Catherine's a former assistant district attorney in the Manhattan DA's office. Thanks for your time this morning. Throughout the argument, it really did seem to folks who are watching and listening that the justices didn't really spend a fair amount of time focusing on one of the central questions here in this case, whether the former president actually participated in an insurrection. What do you make of that part of this?
They clearly did not want to go there. It's, the statement that at the end of the decision, all 9 members of the court agree with the result that Section 3 rests with Congress and not the state. That's very important that it was unanimous. So you can't say it was, 7-2, 5-4. Everyone was on the same page as to the result. As Carol said, some of the more liberal justices had little quibble, but they agree with the result that Colorado on its own can't do that. No state in the United States can do that. So I think they deliberately, all 9 of them, really wanted to stay away from insurrection versus not doing an insurrection.
All right, stand by for me as well. I want to bring Vaughn back into the conversation because perhaps unsurprisingly, we do have a statement now from the former president on the heels of this unanimous Supreme Court decision. What's he saying about this?
It's a short one, Craig. Quote, "Big win for America," all caps on his social media account. Again, Donald Trump is in Mar-a-Lago ahead of Super Tuesday. We could expect him to go and make statements here today, as he did after those oral arguments went before the Supreme Court, in which he addressed cameras and suggested this was all part of Democratic efforts to try to keep him off of the ballot and try to disenfranchise, in his words, millions of Republican voters here around the country. Now, as for those Republican voters, they're going to have the shot, not only in Colorado, but those other 15 states for Super Tuesday tomorrow, for vote for Donald Trump if they so choose to, and quite likely come the general election. If Donald Trump does, in fact, become the presumptive nominee, we could expect to see him on the ballot. And for Donald Trump, making that case that there have been efforts to take away the opportunity for him to be at the White House has been at the core of his 2024 presidential White House run.
Again, you spent a great deal of time covering the former president when he was in office and since he's been a candidate as well. The reality is, with the exception of Save Washington, D.C. this weekend, none of the president's legal problems so far appear to have any sort of effect on him politically so far. Fair to say?
Fair to say. And we've seen the Republicans who were at one point running against him 1 year ago. It was a year ago March when that first indictment came down, stemming from the alleged hush money payments in the criminal trial that he faces, which is slated to begin on March 25th, just 3 weeks from now. It was the Republicans that were running against him that lined up in his defense. Even around these Supreme Court arguments, it was again Republicans from Ron DeSantis to Nikki Haley to Mike Pence who again were arguing that Donald Trump should remain on the ballot and have come to his defense. And largely, we have seen Republican voters, millions of Republican voters, come to his defense at the ballot box this spring.
All right, let's pause the political, turn back once again to the legal analyst. I know you've been able to sift through this a little bit more. Anything jump out at you?
Yeah, the court seemed really concerned with this idea of a patchwork of rulings across the entire country. And I think that's why the court, for all 9 members, decided that Colorado can't do this. And of course, some of the progressives on the court are concerned that the court went further than it needs to. But we should note that this is not sort of the last word that we will hear from these justices this term when it comes to the former president. They have an enormous issue on their plate. Immunity. And in that case, again, his acts leading up to January 6th are going to be at the heart of that. Because remember, in that case, in Washington, D.C., he's being charged criminally with what the special prosecutor thinks, the special counsel thinks, were his efforts to try to reverse the 2020 election. And so even if this case, his actions on January 6th were certainly an enormous part of it, and they've sort of dodged that issue, they're going to have to confront it head on very soon.
Again, I know we haven't had a great deal of time to start to sift through this, but have you been able to glean anything in terms of how these justices may rule on that based on anything that's written here or said here?
No, mostly because they tried to dodge it so fully in this one that they don't dip their toe in that. But they could dodge it in that way because, remember, here, they didn't even have to get to the insurrectionist part of this because they had 5 different other ways to try to get out of it. They chose the congressional route, but there were other ways. And so they just weren't confronted with it as head on as they're going to be an immunity. There's no way for them to dodge it. When they're deciding whether or not he should be shielded from prosecution for his own acts, his acts are going to be at the heart of that case.
And to be clear, this decision today from the High Court, not just immunity, the other legal challenges facing the former president, this doesn't mean anything for those.
No, it doesn't. Obviously, the one that's coming up most sort of pressingly is the New York hush money case, perhaps the only criminal case that he will face before the November election. That one is, of course, slated for March 25th, Craig.
All right, let's turn back to the political for just a moment here, because as you point out, we are just hours away from Super Tuesday. At this point, any reason to believe that the former president's momentum will be slowed at all tomorrow?
No. Number one, polling shows no evidence of that. And folks around the country are already voting by mail. Just this weekend, he won elections in Missouri, in Idaho, in Michigan, picking up all the delegates coming from those states. The only place that he lost this weekend, and the only place that he has lost throughout this entire primary process so far, was Washington, D.C., which Donald Trump said, of course, Nikki Haley, in his words, would win the swamp in the vote of the D.C. insiders. But we and the Trump campaign as well, they expect him to hit the delegate threshold to become the presumptive nominee as soon as March 19th. That is the day when Donald Trump would hit that delegate mark to be the presumptive nominee. And it's interesting when we're talking about that March 25th hush money payment trial. That would start just 6 days later. So it would open up his calendar to almost set aside the campaigning for a moment and focus on the legal. And one other note, when we're talking about the Supreme Court in those oral arguments on April 22nd around presidential immunity, Donald Trump for years since leaving the White House attacked this U.S. Supreme Court in one cause for not overturning the 2020 election results. In 2022, he made the case on his social media account that they always rule against him. And so that's why this celebration from him today is so notable. But you also look at, even in his own remarks, he's been recently touting the 3 Supreme Court justices, those 3 conservative justices that he nominated and got onto the bench. So Donald Trump realizes now just how much is at stake on the Supreme Court.
We also just received an official statement now from the Colorado states. This is the Secretary of State there in Colorado, Jenna Griswold. The United States Supreme Court has ruled that states do not have the authority to enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment for federal candidates. In accordance with this decision, Donald Trump is an eligible candidate on Colorado's 2024 presidential primary. Of course, that primary happening tomorrow with many others around this country. And as Laura Jarrett pointed out, this is not just the case for Colorado. This answers the question about whether the former president can remain on ballots in other states where they have tried to take him off. The high court saying again unanimously that states cannot do that. So a big thanks to Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, I know you're going to be very busy over the next day or so covering the former president. Laura Jarrett, no one reads faster and processes and synthesizes information quicker than you. So thanks to you as well.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.